Alright, so this season I was able to get to King of Games with Paleozoics. I've been wanting to do something like this for a while, but last season I just kind of scummed up there with Ancient Gears and they were tier 1. But this season I was able to get in with a rogue strategy. I'm going to go over the deck, the various matchups it has with all the decks in the meta, and hopefully you can build this yourself. So I really only had Sphere Karibo for the 6 Samurai matchup. It came in handy against some other rogue strategies like Hazy Flame, but this is really useful for getting your opponent's Shien to defense position where you can beat over it with, Atrix or Juggler or your boosted Paleozoics. Atrix also was just for the 6 Samurai matchup. I ran this instead of something more conventional like Cypher Soldier because I wanted to actually be able to use my traps when they had Shien out. When your opponent has Shien on the board, Atrix will allow you to use trap cards because it says that the activation and effects of normal trap cards activated on your side of the field cannot be negated. And, they'll try to negate it, but it'll still go through. Particularly if you have a Canadia set and you have Atrix on the board. The moment they summon Shien, feel free to Canadia that sucker, because there's nothing they can do about it. Juggler is mostly a remnant from an old deck list I had. It's for some spot removal that this deck so desperately needs. It didn't really come in handy for the 6 Samurai matchup too often, because the player would just use their Fuma to protect their Shien. So I ended up just setting this and using it as sort of protection from their attacks. This card really did not help me though with the Ancient Gear matchup. As many players know, the Ancient Gears are great at stopping flip effects and monster effects from going through. This card is no exception, and it's really just a bad card to see during that matchup. The big champion of this deck is Wetlands. It allows you to boost your Paleozoics up to 2400, and with attack booster level 2 in place, these permanently buff your level 2 or lower monsters by 200. So if you have this on field, all your Paleozoics have a solid 2600, which is just enough to beat over Shien. You'll see 6 Samurai players often try to negate this. You can use that to your advantage if you've got 2 in hand. Play the first one, let them negate it, play the second one, and let them play through your back row as you wish. I have the 2 Drowning in here for the 6 Samurai matchup as well, but it's also just a really good card in general. I can try to bait at the Shien negate during the battle phase with Curse of Anubis, or with Canadia, or with Hallucigenia, and then hit him with a Drowning Mirror Force. It really is a destructive card in this deck. I ran 2 instead of 3, mostly because I don't have 3, but even if I had 3, it's not a card you want to be seeing all the time, especially considering the Paleozoic swarming capabilities. It's good for playing passive and then waiting to unleash all your Paleozoics at once. What you want to do is if you have this set, particularly if you've got, if you've baited out the Shien negate with like Anubis or Hallucigenia, you chain Drowning Mirror Force and then chain a Paleozoic from the grave, and now they got no monsters, or they have like a set monster or a defense position monster, and you got a 2600 beater. Then you can just go into your next turn, maybe Pakia, and you've got a pretty solid control over the board state. 1 Hallucigenia, not much to say here. It's an okay card, not the best of the Paleozoics, but it comes in handy, especially during the 6 Samurai matchup. It has some applications in the Ancient Gear matchup. You can try to use it to beat over a face-up dragon. However, I found that if you got a face-up dragon on your opponent's board, it's because you're going, second or third. And typically you want to be Canadiaing that dragon as much as possible, preventing it from destroying your back row or their own back row. Obviously, 3 Canadia, best card in the deck. It's a very nice card for countering the very fast meta that we're in. I had 1 bad aim, just another piece of spot removal. I'd probably run 2, maybe Hallucigenia, maybe not, but it really comes in clutch, especially during the Ancient Gear matchup. Just taking out the Wyvern or trying to cause their Gear Town to miss timing. It's just a really standout card. I found that in the 6 Samurai matchup, it wasn't particularly useful. Obviously, they have a lot of protection for their Shien. It's probably preferable to use other cards like Canadia, which, sort of dodge the whole graveyard protection. Obviously, running through Pakia, it's a really great card for drawing and cycling through your deck. It helps you see Wetlands a lot more often. I briefly toyed with the idea of having 2 only, since a lot of the time I would draw Pakia when I really didn't need it. It's almost a dead card. However, with the likelihood of you drawing a Paleozoic being roughly 50-50, depending on what your opening hand was, it's a pretty decent card. And it allows you to cycle through your deck at an alarming rate. Allows you to see things like Sphere Karibo, especially on your opponent's turn. Curse of Anubis is a great one of. It's a fantastic card because it only affects effect monsters, and all the Paleozoics summon themselves as normal monsters. I would prefer this card over Windstorms for a couple of reasons, mostly because you get to keep your Paleozoics in attack position, and this has the added benefit of being able to beat over any of your opponent's monsters on your turn. Basically guarantees that you're able to destroy a couple of their monsters. And then, finally, we have 3 Morella. Pretty standard card, and basically using this to get rid of the cards you don't want. So if you have a couple of back rows set and no Paleozoics in hand, I would Morella a Pakia to the graveyard. That way you don't draw the dead Pakia. That way with the Morella and a Pakia in the graveyard, you're more likely to encounter some of your other more powerful traps. This will dump 2 Paleozoics into the grave for sure, though. Now, as for other cards I'd run, If I had DD Warrior, I'd probably run that instead of Wind-Up Juggler. If I had another bad aim, I might run that as well. Definitely run only 2 wetlands. Don't run counter traps in general, because you can't chain your Paleozoics from the grave to those, because they are, after all, spell speed 3. Of course, the question is, do you run Cypher Soldier? If you don't have Atrax, but you have 3 Cypher Soldier, you can definitely swap Atrax for Cypher Soldier. However, I found that I won a lot of the 6 Samurai matchups simply because I had Atrax out on board and they didn't know what it did. I had a opponent try to Treacherous Trap all my Atrax once actually. Of course that didn't do anything because it's unaffected by the effects of whole cards. Now in the past, I've ran Paleozoics with Chain Reaction. In this particular meta, Chain Reaction is just way too slow, it's way too susceptible, and of course it doesn't help you get over Xian, which is the big problem. These 6 Samurai are tier 0 right now, they're the things you need to be countering, your deck needs to reflect, how do I best take down Xian? And you've got Canadian Atrax for that. It's all really about the art of baiting out your opponent, you know, trying to make them think that one of your traps is really scary. Of course, against burn decks, this deck really does shine as long as you play your back row right. You really want to try to focus on having only 1 monster, because you don't want the Lava Golem to hit you. Cards like Bad Aim are great for getting rid of the problem cards like Onslaught or Opponent's Golem that they summon into your field. You'll find Atrax is useful in this mashup because it's an insect monster. Now the typical burn strategy is to, Jade Insect Whistle to make your opponent draw that Parasite in your deck. However, you can just put Atrax at the top of your deck instead because it's an insect. I only went against Quackimiro once. For that matchup, the Sphere Karibo was exceedingly helpful. Also, since all the Paleozoics aren't affected by monster effects, your opponent can't Maximus your Paleozoic. This deck has a particularly bad matchup against Hazy Flames because obviously you can't target those things. However, just letting them kind of crash into a Drowning Mirror Force or a Curse of Anubis or even a Sphere Karibo is exceedingly helpful. And oddly enough, the best card for outing the Hazy Flames is Sphere Karibo. You can knock their Sphinx into defense mode, or if they're running Jinsei, you can knock that into defense mode and run over it with a Paleozoic or a Wind-Up Juggler, because this is non-targeting removal. This card really helped also for Hazy Flame matchups. I had a couple, surprisingly. Hazy Flames are an interesting out to 6 Samurai. Really inconsistent, especially if you're running the Monster Mash version. Overall, really fun deck. There's a lot of thinking to be done, a lot of interaction going on. Got a lot of opportunities with this deck, especially with the Xian Negate. Trying to bait that out is really fun because you can almost always predict when they're going to do it and which cards most effectively help you bait it out. Wetlands obviously is great for that. Overall, it's got a pretty decent matchup against a lot of the meta decks, and I'd highly recommend running this. If you don't have 3 Canada, maybe not. It's a pretty essential piece of this deck, but a lot of the other cards are replaceable. For example, you could run Wall of Disruption instead of Drowning. You could run DD Warrior or the Karakuri monster instead of Juggler. You could run Cypher Soldier instead of Atrax. I think this is one of the most effective builds you can do, simply because the ratios all just seem to work out very well. Be sure to let me know if this video has helped you out in any way. Thanks for watching.